John here, and today we're going to do a paid request. This is for Kevin. Thank you to Kevin for the paid request. He wanted me to talk about and review X-Men Days of Future Past, 2014 film. And if anybody's interested in the paid request, I usually put a link down below in the description to my PayPal. And any amount you want to donate there is fine. If you want me to review a film of any kind, genre, doesn't matter. Old, new, what have you. It could be a commentary, movie-related topic, and stuff of that sort. So, again, a link to my PayPal is down below for those that are interested. But, yeah, so today we're going to talk about, again, X-Men Days of Future Past, which I did see this in the theater. And I do remember seeing this in the theater, and I remember liking it more when I first saw it. And rewatching it again, I think, for me, this is like a decent time waster, and we'll talk more about that here. Now, the plot real quick, so, it's in the future, and you have these Sentinels that are out to annihilate mutants. You got the X-Men, you got Professor X, you got Wolverine, you got Magneto, you got Storm, you got Kitty Pryde, and others. They're fighting them off, and soon we learn that these invincible Sentinels were created using the DNA of Mystique in the past, back in the 70s, by a scientist. And Professor X tells that, the only way and their only chance to stop these Sentinels is for Wolverine to return, time travel back to the 70s, using Kitty Pryde's ability to unite the young professor and Magneto to find Mystique and change the course. And that's the plot here to the film. Now, it was directed by Bryan Singer, and Bryan Singer did the first X-Men film, and I believe he did X-Men 2 and Superman Returns. But of course, with Bryan Singer did all that stuff that came out. How much of it is true, I'm not sure. But Bryan Singer, it seems like he's been blacklisted. What was the last thing that he directed? But like I said, he did direct this film here. And the cast, so you got Patrick Stewart, he returns as Professor X, does a great job. Ian McKellen as Magneto, again, does a great job. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. To me, he's one of the highlights of the film. Even going back, to the first X-Men film, those three names right there, perfectly casted. But when you get to, for me, and of course, you have Halle Berry in there for a little bit, not too much. I say maybe total she has, 5 minutes of screen time, but this is where you kind of get to the younger Professor X, played by James McAvoy, and the young Magneto, played by Michael Fassbender. James McAvoy, for me, I never really got the appeal. I'm just being honest. I mean, I never really got the appeal of James McAvoy. Even when I saw First Class in the theater, and I'm like, this guy to me is not a good fit for Professor X. I don't know, just something about him. Just, again, I don't really get the appeal. That's why I call him James Macadamia Nuts. And again, I know I'm making fun here, but I just never really got what was so special about this guy. Someone please explain to me. I mean, I will say in the film Split, I didn't mind his performance, but, it's not like it really changed my mind on James McAvoy. Maybe at best, he's an okay actor, but to me, he's not anything to write home about. And again, I know some people are going to get upset by that, but again, I just never really got the appeal of James McAvoy or Macadamia Nuts. Michael Fassbender, he's an actor that really I can give or take. Like, as Magneto, I don't think he really did anything for me. Like, even with First Class, maybe I can say he's, compared to James McAvoy, he's more tolerable as an actor. Like, to me, he's more digestible acting wise. Maybe a little bit better of an actor than James McAvoy. Some might disagree. Some might, think different. But that's the thing with Michael Fassbender. Whenever I see him in the film, and with these films here, talking about the later X-Men films, he's a guy that, really I can give or take. I think there's, for me, better actors that you could have gotten for these parts. Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique. I've never really got into Jennifer Lawrence. She may look the part of Mystique, but I don't see, what's so special about her, and she really doesn't have much of a presence here. Again, she may look like Mystique, but she's no Rebecca Romijn, like in the first movie and the second movie. To me, she was a better Mystique. Jennifer Lawrence is like, again, she may look the part, but she has as much, screen presence, or, as a bottle cap here. Her, to me, I don't see what the hoopla is, what the big hoopla is with Jennifer Lawrence. Nicholas Hoult as the young beast here. Nicholas Hoult is another one of those guys that I can give or take. I know he was in Renfield. I've heard good things about that movie, but Nicholas Hoult, even going back to First Class, he's a guy that I can kind of give or take. I can watch him as an actor, but for me, he wasn't great as the Beast. I think Kelsey Grammer was a far better Beast. Anna Paquin's in here for a little bit. If I remember, she's more in the beginning of the film, but she's not in it too much. You have, which now he goes by Elliot Page, Elliot/Ellen Page. Yeah, he or she is in here. I don't know which one it is, but I don't know. I'm gonna get crap for that. But she or he. I never really minded Ellen Page at the time as an actress, or again, now they go by Elliot. Again, I never minded Ellen Page or Elliot Page as Kitty Pryde. Peter Dinklage is in here as Trask. He's a scientist that, gets the DNA from Mystique. And, Peter Dinklage is fine. Again, Peter Dinklage is fine in the role here. Quicksilver, played by Evan Peters. To me, he did a good job here. He's with Wolverine. He's one of the highlights of the film. I kind of wish that Quicksilver had more to do. Like he has that one scene, where everything is in slow motion, and he's kind of, taking out some of these secret agents. And again, it's good stuff. I kind of wish that there was more of those moments with Quicksilver, but he was fine in the role. Now, as far as stuff that I wrote down here, now the character of Kitty Pryde, does she have that ability to travel people back to the past? Because we see Wolverine on the table, and she's sending him back to the 70s. Yeah, I never knew that she had that ability. I don't know much about the character, so I'm open to correction there. I know she can travel through walls, but again, I never knew that, she could travel somebody, or, take them back to the past. Now, I will say, the 70s time period, I thought they did a good job of capturing that era. So I will give credit there. I think there's moments where the CGI doesn't look that good, where you would see a transformation from Mystique, and I'm sorry, just the CGI does not hold up, or just it looks subpar. Again, Wolverine has some good moments in the beginning where he takes out these guys in a hotel room. That was cool. But also, when you get into the younger Professor, and the first time that you see James McAvoy He's very hippie, with the long hair, like he's trying, he's channeling the dude. And I didn't like that. And again, I know this is the 70s, but I'm also kind of confused by the timeline here, and I'll talk about that here in a second. And then there's also this one thing, like, where basically, Magneto was implicated in the assassination of JFK, and I'm like, I don't know, did you really need that in the film? And again, some of the scenes with Quicksilver, they're good. When they're in the White House and, they're breaking out, they have to get Magneto, and, Quicksilver takes out those secret agents. That was cool. The slow time, and, where he's moving the bullets, and you got that Jim Croce song, Time in a Bottle. That was a cool scene, cool moment. The whole dynamic, and this is kind of getting into a nitpick here, like the dynamic between Charles and Eric, in the past. Again, I didn't care for these actors. And again, I know people are going to disagree because people loved, First Class. I will say that out of the later X-Men films, of that, First Class, this movie, Apocalypse, which I haven't seen, I will say this is the best one. But I didn't really care about the dynamic of a younger Professor and younger Magneto, especially when the actors, again, don't really do much for me. And again, Mystique, she really becomes a plot point here, especially in the second half of the film, and that's another nitpick that I have. There's a weird moment in the film where Wolverine, and you see the character of Stryker appear. I mean, it's not Brian Cox, it's a younger Stryker. But that's where, for me, the timeline gets a little confusing for me. So I'm trying to okay, so when did Wolverine, got experimented on? And if this is the 70s, when did he get experimented on? So I'm not again on the up and up with the timeline of these movies, but for me, having Stryker in there, a younger Stryker, and this is the 70s, again, what kind of timeline are we, when did Wolverine get experimented on? I would like to know, considering how young Stryker is, how young that character is in this film here. There's a moment where Wolverine forgets who he is, and I didn't understand that. And then, skipping ahead to the third act of the film, that's where you have, the President Nixon, you got the scientist character played by Peter Dinklage. They're getting ready to release these Sentinels, and, Magneto, he raises the stadium, which I didn't really care too much about that. And he's in control of the Sentinels, and the Professor, is stopping Mystique, basically in control of her mind, and gets her to stop. And yeah, so those are some things that I wrote down here. But for me, with this film here, I think while there's some decent stuff here, then I would say, like, Wolverine, Quicksilver, they're highlights. They are highlights of the film. I think it does a good job of capturing, that 70s time period, and is able to, they do a good job of capturing that aesthetic of the 70s. And, there might be some good visuals here and there, even though you got some, CGI that isn't that great. But, I just never really been into these, or I should say, I never really got into these later X-Men movies. I much prefer the first three. But, yeah, so I think I covered quite a bit here. But let me get to my overall thoughts on X-Men Days of Future Past. X-Men Days of Future Past brings back some familiar faces, with Wolverine and Quicksilver being highlights. It captures the 70s time period fairly good, including some decent visuals. However, the second half of the film wanes for me when it becomes more about Mystique. Truthfully, I never got fully invested in these later X-Men movies, but I can give credit in areas that make this for me a decent time waster. And out of 10, I'm going to give X-Men Days of Future Past a 6 out of 10. But thank you for watching, and take care.